Our first guest is a 1997 Full Sail Recording Arts graduate who got in his car after his last test and headed west for an audio career in Los Angeles.
If you call that a car.
His singular focus paid off by 1998 when he started racking up credits with Ice Cube, TQ, Redman. His extensive and admirable resume is an assistant engineer, and mixing engineer for the likes of Redman, TLC, Method Man, Brian McKnight, Genuine, Wu-Tang Clan, Pink, Christina Aguilera, Madonna, Ciara, Nas, The Game, Chris Brown, Daddy Yankee, Talib Kweli, Murs, Flo Rida, Usher, Nicki Minaj, Common, Britney Spears, among many others. His work with Black Eyed Peas has earned him multiple Grammy nominations for their Elephunk record and a Grammy Award for the E.N.D. record, which was the 2010 Best Pop Vocal Album. In truly cosmic form, I wrote this, his engineering on will.i.am's Reach for the Stars was broadcast from Mars from the Curiosity rover, making it the first debut broadcast from another planet. And I looked this up last night.
And to this day, still the largest record ever on Mars.
And largest record on Mars, says Dave.
Also the worst record on Mars.
I looked this up last night. The Mars orbit, depending on what part of the year we're in, moves elliptically. At that point, it was around 154 million miles away from the Earth. I don't know if you looked that up.
It's incredible.
154 miles away from Earth.
It's really cool. It's really cool.
Amazing broadcast back. So with that said, please, a warm welcome for the 2013 Full Sail Hall of Fame inductee, Dylan 3D Dresdow.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. Thank you all.
How does that feel?
Happy Valentine's Day.
I know him and still
I can feel the love.
How does that feel to be at Full Sail and get a round of applause like that?
It's incredible. It's really, really cool. I mean, I remember sitting in these chairs and, you know, we did a little bit, we had the Success Seminar back then. I don't know if you guys still have that these days, but yeah, I'm nervous. I hope I don't say something irresponsible that somebody takes the wrong way and I destroy a career today. I shouldn't say that next to Dave Pensado.
So let's talk about Dave Pensado. He's our second guest. He started his professional audio career in the studio and live venues in Atlanta, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So far, so good. Upon his move to Los Angeles, he quickly started landing engineering and mixing engineering work with artists, and this is going to be a long list. Belle Biv DeVoe, Paula Abdul. And moving on, he's got credits which read really like a who's who of R&B, gospel, hip-hop, and pop music. Brian McKnight, Jamiroquai, Tevin Campbell, Coolio, BB Winans, Casey and JoJo, the Black Eyed Peas, Jermaine Dupri, Christina Aguilera, Cisco, Shanice, Warren G, Enrique Iglesias, Elton John, Diana Ross, Destiny's Child, Pink, Ice Cube, Kelly Rowland, Justin Timberlake, Brandy, Boyz II Men, Khalees, Solange, Kelly Clarkson, Nelly, Neville Brothers, Lionel Richie, Kenny G, Pussycat Dolls, Will Smith, Kirk Franklin, Indy Irie, Nelly Furtado, Neo, Jill Scott, Lupe Fiasco, Celine Dion, Seal, Soulja Boy Tell 'Em, The Dream, Wiz Khalifa. Somebody's got to. Ludacris, Gym Class Heroes, Jamie Foxx, Mariah Carey, Janet Jackson, Maroon 5, Wyclef Jean, Shakira, Justin Bieber, Whitney Houston, Rick Ross. It's a list. In 2006, this is quite a notable moment. In 2006, his mixes for Mary J. Blige's Be Without You, Beyonce's Check on It, and Keisha Cole's Love all reached #1 in the same month on the Billboard Top 100.
And Pussycat Dolls.
And Pussycat Dolls, too.
They were all in the top 5 at the same time.
Holy cow. His Pensado's Place webisode series has reached... It's in bonus now. It's reached 101 uploaded episodes of crucial industry tips and talk. So again, a hearty welcome. Please welcome engineer and mentor extraordinaire, Dave Pensado.
Thank you, guys. That's overwhelming.
So do we think we might have some questions based on their experience at some point today?
Did you plan on like this great name, this great name, this great name, this great name, Celine Dion, this great name, this great name, this Kenny G, this great name, this great name, this great name. It's like, really good. I'm thinking, like, damn, man, these kids are gonna think I'm good. And then you throw in those like names, and they're like, really? He did that? But you know, it brings out a point and a good place to start. Are we starting?
Absolutely.
And it brings out a good place to start. What we all do for a living, sometimes the skill is not in doing a big act that has a reputation and that's your favorite. Sometimes you got to do a Celine Dion, and I learned as much from working with her as I did, probably more. You know what I'm saying, right? The skill set and the skills you get. Excuse me. I haven't slept since Monday, literally. The skill sets you get here. Sometimes you might think, man, I don't need to do that. I don't need to do that, but you do. You if you're going to do this for a living, and you hang out a shingle and you say, I'm an engineer. You pretty much have to do what comes through the door, especially when you start out. And it's kind of neat when you hear all those names, and when I hear all Dylan's names, it's not the fact that they're all big names that impresses me. It's that a cat like Dylan can actually do that wide variety of music. Think about this. Before you can do all of those different types of acts, you've got to kind of understand that form of music, right? And how do you get to understand that form of music in such a way to be able to engineer it? You get the skills here to do anything, but one of the things they can't teach you here is taste. And how do you get taste? Because ultimately that's what we get paid for, is our taste. And if you've got a wide range of taste, you can do Celine Dion and Soulja Boy in the same year. It's kind of weird, but if you don't love music, and if you don't love listening to music, and if you're not fully immersed in music and just can't, like I listen to records before I eat breakfast in the morning. It's just, and Dylan's the same way. Dylan, this guy, you can't call him and go, did you hear the new fill in the blank? Yeah, it's on Mercury Records, yeah. In fact, he used to be in this group called Painful Rectal Itch, and now he's playing in this other group, and now, don't you think that's an important place to start, Dylan?
Yeah, we absorb a lot of this because it helps us become better mix engineers. I mean, whenever you talk about the wide genres of, working with Celine Dion and Soulja Boy, that's going to sustain his career for a very long time, because if he can bridge the gap between those, then whenever dubstep comes out, he's not going to be shell-shocked by it. He's going to find a way to make that genre work and be ready for it. So those are things that are going to help your career go on even longer. But like, I was just watching this documentary on sushi, of all things.
On sushi?
And so the sushi, chef, I know it's an analogy. Follow me here, fellow.
Okay.
So he's talking about how if you can't be a good
my recipe
sushi
book.
Well, no, he says you can't be a good sushi chef if you don't know what good food tastes like. True. Which goes back to your thing about taste. Everybody's taste here is going to be different. If you have bad taste, you're going to have trouble being a mix engineer. I guarantee it.
Guaranteed.
So whenever, sometimes I do listen to music that I might not even be into, but I have to figure out what it is that the kids are into or whatever the general public is, so that I can kind of like, if that does come across my hard drive someday, I'm not shell-shocked and like, oh, I don't know what to do. So, and I'll still have my own flavor that I'll inject into that, but I need to make sure that I'm studying these records so that I understand,
Yeah, but you're not studying. Studying is the wrong word. You love it.
It's yeah.
Let me tell you something about Dylan that I think can help. Like, if you guys leave here today and you acquire just a tiny bit more knowledge about how to be successful in the world you're going to inherit, then lack of sleep, my flight will have been a success. It's not about us. It's about you guys. And if you know anything about Dylan and I, we like handing the torch, passing it on. But one of the cool things about today's world is I called him up about 2 years ago and I said, man, what you listening to? I'm just not really finding any new cool stuff. And he sent me his Spotify list. There was shit in there in French, a German group, some heavy metal from like Sweden that I couldn't make it through it. It was like painful. And I like metal. I used to play in a metal band, but I think that's important. Like, to expand on something Dylan said, if I handed each of you a recipe book, and you had to make foie gras, well, you could follow the directions, you could do the ingredients, you could get all the proportions exact, but at some point you've got to taste it. And even though you've done everything right, you don't know if it's really tastes like duck liver or not. And that's what he was trying to say, although I'm saying it quite better as usual.
I'll never have my own internet show. Yeah.
Where taste, and pun intended, where taste comes in is if you've never tasted a particular food, how can you know when you've done it right? How can you know, So taste is probably the thing that the list that you heard of Dylan's credits, taste is what gave him that list. The skills that he got here at Full Sail got him his start, got him his foundation, but ultimately it's that taste to know when what I usually say is I can teach anybody how to get a great snare drum sound. I just can't teach you what a great snare drum sound is. And when you're sitting there in the studio alone at 4 a.m, you've got to have this mix in New York in 4 hours, and you hit play and you've been working on this mix and it's just not right. That's where taste comes in. And when the client looks at you at 4 a.m. and you haven't slept in 3 days and goes, is that snare sound right? Of course it sounds right. What do you think? I spent 12 hours trying to make it sound bad on purpose, And so taste gives you confidence. It's just everything, the foundation is all on, it starts on just good, solid, fundamental skills, the same skills that Dylan learned here before electricity, and the same skills that, man, I hung out with Rupert Neve the other day. Can you believe that? The same skills that Rupert had. It's all the same skills. A dB, still a dB. You know what I'm saying? 20 hertz is still 20 hertz. But what changes is taste. If you want to stay relevant for a while, you got to have good taste. And another thing that taste comes in, if I'm getting ahead, stop me, because I'm like spacey. But think about this. I had a #1 record one time, and this particular record, by the time it hit the radio, it was about 5 years old, 4 years old. Now, a typical record is recorded, first of all, it's written, the demo's done, and all that. That process can sometimes usually take a year. Then the A&R guy, the whole record company thing, blah, blah, blah. So finally, let's say Dylan gets to mix the project. Now we're into that song 2.5 years. And let's say it's the second single. Now we're into that song 3.5, 4 years. So now, had I copied a song I heard on the radio, my song would now be 9 years old. The 5 years it took to get to radio, plus if I listened to a song that day when I started that mix, that song was possibly 3 or 4 years old. So now I've got a 9-year-old product on the radio. That's pretty scary.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially in urban music, because it has such a short shelf life, you have to have the foresight to know where the music is going. So, like you said, if I copy what's on the radio today, I'm already behind by how long? So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So taste again, and we'll get off taste. I know you guys want to talk about how to EQ kick drums. You look like a kick drum crowd to me. Yeah. We'll get off this philosophizing.
Full tech. Okay, we can move on now.
Okay. But taste is really important, and if I can leave you today, and Dylan can leave you with one concept, it's you got to listen to records, and you got to listen for fun. It's never your job to listen to records. It's just so much fun. About 3 years ago, I heard a group called Alabama Shakes. Remember, I'm telling the whole world, you guys got to hear this little group from Alabama, and now they're like on the GRAMMYs, And I think I just got a group signed out of Atlanta. In fact, they're a dubstep group that I heard about 3 years ago and fell in love with by just going on YouTube, and just whatever happens on the right-hand corner, if it looked interesting, just click on it, keep going. And I fell in love with this group, kind of followed them, and now they've got a song called Poppin' Off. The group's called Watch the Duck. I think they're going to be on 106 in Park this week. So, taste, very, very, very important.
So with that in mind, maybe follow it up with a question I had for both of you. Because you're talking about trying to make something that has longevity, and some old records sound amazing because just the sounds are amazing, but you're mix engineers. I mean, you guys make hay by being mix engineers. Can you give me just a sort of overview of what you do when you receive a job to mix either a song or a record? What are those first steps? What are the first approaches even before you've started moving faders or doing anything?
Well, the first thing is just making sure all the files are going to be there. We get so many freaking sessions where you're missing an audio file.
Every session.
And they say, that's very frustrating because they're like, just go on and mix everything else around that. But how do you do that whenever you need to, you know what I mean? You have to understand everything, all the different elements that are going into things.
Your mic sounds better than mine. Thanks. Check. Yeah.
Juice me up back there. So anyway, my point is, I have to make sure that all of the technical stuff is taken care of just so I can get started, because that's very frustrating whenever I'm missing a xylophone part, and that's supposed to set up the next section in the bridge, because now I'm going to put like a reverse reverb to set that section up whenever there was already a part there. So it's really important for me to just have all of that taken care of.
Plus, can I toss this in real quick?
Yeah.
Plus, it's not just stuff that's missing. Sometimes it was done on an LE or something, and half the session is muted, and you don't know if is that supposed to be in the song or not supposed to be in the song.
Yeah, it's great to send rough mixes if you guys are tracking
We're
sessions.
bitching and moaning about,
a little bit.
about making money doing cool stuff.
But if I can get one of these students to correctly send me a rough mix so that I can have something to reference to make sure that I'm at least mixing the right song, that's really important. I listen to whatever is sent to me from the get-go, because first of all, I kind of want to digest a little bit. It's the very first opportunity for me to get that first impression. Now, when the process is done, I've listened to that song a bazillion times, but the first time that it's played on the radio, people are going to be exposed to it for the very first time. And I'm constantly keeping that in mind. Like, sometimes I get into arguments with producers over particular things, and I say, now we've been talking about this for 30 minutes, but the first person who hears this for the first time, they're not going to get this 30-minute explanation. They're just going to hear it and go, that's whack. Go to the next radio station. So the first thing I start with is just paying attention, listening, and trying to make sure that I get the vision in my mind of where the song is supposed to go, and ultimately what the client wants, because it's not my song. It's not my dream. It might sound idealistic and melodramatic, but these are people's dreams. It's really important for us to take them serious. And we can joke around about them sometimes, in the right setting, but ultimately I want to make sure that my clients are getting, everything they want from me. So that's my process. Once I start getting into it, I start with my kicks, or I start with my drums, and then go on to bass and bring in the vocals and everything else. But
just to add what Dylan said, it's not unusual for Dylan, myself, and cats that work at this level to get a session that's just really well done, well organized, well recorded, and then 2 days later, an artist will say, "Man, do you know anybody that I can use at my home studio?" And you go, "Man, that cat was really good." So you say, I've never met this guy, but I got some work from him, some sessions from him, and I think this could be a great guy to work with you. Both he and I have done that. I know Tony does it. A lot of the guys do that. So you never know, just from a practical standpoint, mercenary standpoint, you never know where your next gig's coming from. And so don't ever let anything, everything represents you, and everything represents Full Sail. You're not just representing yourself when you send a session out to be mixed. You're representing Full Sail, you're representing Dylan, you're representing everybody that came before you, so it's a responsibility. That sounded corny, but you know what?
No, I agree. But I mean, you know, I'm a mix engineer, I'm pretty well established, but I've still gotten work from DJs because whenever I bounce my stems down, you know, whenever you're done with your mix, you print like an acapella and an instrumental. And I always put the BPM of on the acapella file so that if it does go to a DJ for remixing, they don't even have to think about that. You know, acapellas are a little bit more tricky sometimes to figure out what the tempo is. Instrumental, you can use programs to do it, you know, it doesn't matter. So that just saved them, even if it only took 5 seconds, I saved them 5 seconds. Mm-hmm. Now, if we're working on 1,000 songs in our lifetime, it adds up to
tell them what I taught you back in the day when we were working together about. You told the story back to me the other day that you didn't quite understand why I told you need to learn how to work every drum machine, every keyboard. You need to know how to work them.
Oh, man. Well, I always there's a lot of things in our profession that we have to do that fall outside of our job description. And when I first broke away from assisting, I was tracking this one producer, and you know, he had an MPC and had this really sour attitude about it, where he couldn't figure out how to sync tape to this MPC machine. And I knew I was feeding him SMPTE and everything, so you know, I kind of had this attitude like, you're the producer, you should understand your tools, I understand these. And so I said, well, whenever you guys figure it out, let me know. And I actually walked downstairs and talked to Dave because we were working in the same studio that day. And Dave kind of said, well, Dylan, if you know that drum machine right now, then this producer is going to work with you for the rest of your life because they know this.
We grew up 20 miles apart. So he's making fun of himself.
That's pretty good, right? It's pretty good. But the point was made. You know,
Lakeland just got voted like the armpit of California.
Come on, Lakeland represent, man.
Not like
yeah.
Catherine
free
High.
stickers.
Catherine High. That's
Kathleen. Yeah.
Kathleen High.
But
it's nothing like Ybor. Ybor's the place.
Yeah, I'm going to
7th Avenue. That's where I was born.
You know, back to the point though that Dave had made. It completely put my attitude in check. That sure, the producer should have known that drum machine, but if I had known it, then I would have solidified that gig with him. So I cracked the manual, I figured it out, and from that point forward, I kept working with the producer. And, you know, so it's not my job description to supply drum machine, to supply samples to a producer either. But if a producer says, hey man, you got any cool 808s that I can add in here? And I have them, then bam, it's gonna make me a, you know, asset to the project. And they're going to continue working with me. To go off on a side thing too, Dave and I were talking. Yeah. I know, we do this, but one of the things that we were talking about with the student body is one of the great things here is you guys can do networking. I'm still in touch with all of my study partners. We still, you know, sometimes it's once a year Facebook message, but most of them I still talk to like every couple of months. And I have actually set up an FTP site, which I will give you the info, Matt, at the end of this, where you guys can actually trade drum samples if you would like to do that. And I also put some impulse responses and stuff like that. Just don't delete anything off of it. But if you guys, you know, if you have like a cool 808 that you want to put up there, go for it. And then if you see some cool stuff that you want to download, go for it.
That's really cool, Dylan.
You know, I think it'd be a great way for the student body to kind of get more interactive because I do regret leaving this school and not having certain things that I could have just done on my own. You know, I could have talked to some other people and said, you guys got some cool drum samples. You know, now it's like, you know, impulse responses is also a really cool thing to get into. And I mean, I've modeled all sorts of cool acoustic spaces.
Man, he sends me like 8 trillion impulse responses a year. I got a stack of CDs of impulse responses. Do you do anything else besides create impulse responses?
And I mix records.
So I wouldn't mind asking one more question before turning the mic over to the students and get their questions. And their questions are always better anyway. But both of you moved across the country to LA, and LA is physically a huge city, just a sprawling city. However, people who move there understand that LA is a company town. And by moving to a company town, it means the whole town basically does one thing. And I have a friend in the movie business. He's a lighting board operator for movies, for commercials, for television. Never talks bad about his jobs. Can you talk a little bit about that from a student who is leaving Full Sail with strong passions about what they do? opinions about music and moving into a city like LA and just how their deportment, how they have to carry themselves in order to stay in the business and work?
Let me start, and the reason I want to start is because if you analyze the world, oh Lord, here he is talking about the world. If you analyze the world doesn't divide events into good, bad, successful, unsuccessful. The world is just decisions, it's just events. So when you make a decision, don't expect it to be a good decision or a bad decision. You don't have enough info to know which is which. It's just a damn decision. Now, in the 80s, I made the decision to move to England. I liked the music that was coming from there, and it just seemed like a cool thing. Move to England, what the hell? So I moved to England. And in terms of the world, that was a bad decision. In terms of me, it was just a decision. I stayed there a couple of months, figured out it wasn't going to be what I wanted to do. I went back to Atlanta. I moved to LA. It wasn't a big deal, right, Dylan? You just moved. And if it doesn't work, it had not worked in LA, I would have gone to New York. If it hadn't worked in New York, I'd have gone somewhere else. So don't think of trying. I get these questions all the time on people that watch the show. What should I do? What should I do? I'm living in the western side of Australia, and all the work's on the eastern side. Should I move? And I'm like, man, just move. Don't. Excuse me. Decisions can't be categorized as good and bad. You could say that my decision to go to England was a bad decision. I don't think so, because it ultimately led me to California. You can say that was a good decision. Well, I met Dylan. That couldn't have been that good a decision. So it depends on how you... Good and bad is something you can't attach to things in the real world, because the real world doesn't come with... So you're saying it was a bad decision on my half, because you ended up... It doesn't come... The real world doesn't come with little tags that say good, bad. If you've got something burning in your heart, if you got a passion... when I first moved to LA, I was living in my car for a few weeks. When Dylan first moved to LA, he had hardships. But we don't remember those hardships. They were just, we were in LA. It was so cool, and we went to studios. We didn't know each other at that time. He moved after I did. But my point is, don't ever buy a sofa. Because once you buy a sofa, then you're tied to that damn sofa. You can't carry it with you to New York. You split half of it with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, so now you got $300 tied into a sofa, and you're thinking about moving to California, but you can't because you got the damn sofa. She ain't gonna give you your $300 back. So avoid responsibilities like the plague. Repeat after me. Avoid responsibilities like the plague. But when you get a responsibility, make it the most important thing in your life. You've got to man up or woman up to all your responsibilities, but avoid them because they tie you to a place. And the thing to learn about his story and mine is not that we moved to LA, but it's that we could. I actually made the decision to move to LA at 10 in the morning, and I was in a car at noon. I didn't own a sofa. I had nothing there.
Dave's more like a hippie. I'm more about responsibility. More like I sat down and I said, okay, well, I want to move to where the work is, because the goals that I had.
Well, I mean, I did too, but what I'm saying
I know. But my point is,
at their age, they can get credit cards, they can get all this stuff. Man, avoid those responsibilities, because that ties you down to a job. You don't want to be tied down in any way. Mobility was what the foundation of our success depended on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I somewhat
Lakeland's not
disagree
the
with
hotbed of recording.
For me, everybody's story is going to be different. I wanted to be working with the artists that I'm working with now, doing big records. I wanted people to listen to what I worked with. Some people are going to be like, oh, sellout. I just want to work on crusty punk rock bands, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. So you don't have to necessarily move to LA to do that, or wherever your job market is. For me,
it was a different world.
It was at the time. It was New York, Nashville, LA. I had to pick one of those. New York was a MFer to break into, and I didn't like the snow. Nashville, I know it's not just country music, but there was a big, thing about country there. And so Los Angeles seemed to make the most sense for me. So even if I had failed at audio engineering, I mean, I just said this in the last interview I did, if and I think this would probably be true for Dave too, if everybody decided that my record sounded like crap, it wouldn't have stopped us. We still would have been making records in our, basements or our garages on a 4-track. I mean, I might not have been doing them to the capacity I'm doing now in like an awesome studio with, 100-channel SSL 9K or something. But I mean, I'd still be making music. That never would have stopped. And so everybody here, I think, needs to ask themselves where they want to be in the future and make sure that you set a definitive goal. I hear some people who are like, I just want to sell a bunch of records. Well, how do you define that? I mean, 50,000? If you're indie, that's pretty good, actually. If you're on a major label, well, you're going to have to recoup and do all this other stuff. So is $1 million enough, And I see a lot of people going through life kind of dissatisfied because they haven't set, first of all, realistic goals, but secondly, definitive goals. Because if you just say, I just want to sell a bunch of records, that can change over time and you can just set yourself up for disappointment. I'm not saying that everybody has to, every record has to be, let's sell 100,000 copies in the first week. But there should be people who say, okay, because everybody's going to be different. Some people aren't even going to want to work in music. They're going to want to do sound for motion picture, or they're going to want to do sound for video games, or something completely different. And I know our careers...
And that's okay. It's very valid.
And going back to Dave's point, though, it is important because our careers are not going to be the same in 20 years, I guarantee it. Something is going to be different. They literally have... We actually have software now that will auto-mix for you, auto-vocal ride for you, So our profession is definitely going to change, but the fact that we can kind of adjust and chameleon ourselves to our surroundings is going to give us the opportunity to sustain our careers, no matter what happens.
Yeah, and to take this full circle, before we leave this part of the show, I don't care what software you got, it's still my taste that you can't duplicate, and that's the one thing that's going to always keep you working. It's the one thing that's going to keep you happy. It's the one thing that's going to help you buy a sofa when you get to where you need to be.